Good afternoon and welcome to the Corporate Responsibility Association webinar series, Leading Sustainable Change. My name is Allie Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Corporate Responsibility Association. And with us today is also Heather Nielsen. She's the Manager of Member Services for the CRA. And wanted to tell you just quickly a little bit about what we're doing at the association. Our mission is to promote the practice and profession of corporate responsibility in the service of good business. We educate and engage leaders at all levels to use corporate responsibility to reduce risk, improve operational efficiency, save money, attract talent, and encourage innovation. We have 5 thought leadership councils. They are a ratings and rankings PLC, professional development, which drives the webinar series, diversity and inclusion, brand and reputation management, and a responsible supply chain group. If you're not involved in some of these and would like more information, please get in touch with me or Heather, and we'll make sure to include you in our next call. It gives me a great privilege and opportunity to introduce you to one of our presenters today, Joan Alexander. She's the Executive Coach and Consultant for Alexander & Associates. Joan, welcome.
Thank you, Allie. Greetings to all of you. I'm Joan Alexander, as introduced. I have the privilege of launching us into this conversation today. After I set the stage a bit, I will introduce Bart and Catherine. Each has prepared a powerful and insightful presentation related to their personal CR leadership experiences. Once Bart and Catherine have presented, we will take your questions and have time for a Q&A discussion. As we go along, please type any questions you have into the webinar question box. Heather will collect the questions and relay them for the question and answer portion. Today's topic is the leadership competencies, both personal and professional, that are necessary to successfully integrate CR into an organization. We'll be talking about how to make corporate responsibility the culture of how your organization does its business each and every day. You will hear from 2 successful CR leaders. Bart is a senior level leader and Catherine a mid-level manager. You will hear of how they do it as well as what sustains them when the going gets tough. Our goal is for you to leave this webinar with new ideas and a new effective leadership model that will help you as a CR practitioner. A little about me. I'm co-principal with Bart of Alexander & Associates, LLC. Our work focuses on guiding organizations, leaders, and teams to lead and implement effective and sustainable change. I'm a consultant and an executive coach. I use both coaching and consulting skills in my work with leaders. I've been at this type of work for more than 25 years, first as an employee in financial services, and then as a consultant to corporations, government organizations, school districts, and nonprofits in both the U.S. and U.K. I've learned that change initiatives, if done well, are successful, fun, and satisfying. However, if done incorrectly, there is no end to the negative impacts change initiatives are likely to create for an organization, its employees, and its business outcomes. Today you're going to learn about the difference between technical leadership and adaptive leadership, and in particular how this type of leadership, called adaptive leadership, applies to CR work. When you expect people to both think and behave differently, adaptive leadership skills are essential. For clarification, technical leaders are the experts. Their gift is to clearly define the problem and develop an effective plan to solve a particular problem. Then the people and other resources are organized around the established plan to implement and execute that plan created by the technical expert. Examples might be designing and constructing a bridge over San Francisco Bay, or designing and building a new high-rise in New York City. For these projects, technical leadership is required to create a prescribed plan that must be precisely followed. However, adaptive leaders are required to lead in situations where both the problem and the solution are unclear and new learning and new behaviors are required. The various parties must explore, learn, and work together to come to a solution. This is often seen in creating and doing things that have not been done before or must be done in different or new ways. An example of adaptive leadership might be a situation where a task that requires multidisciplinary designers and engineers, who may also be tasked with working with not even yet invented components, which may also require new manufacturing techniques. Oh, and let's not forget the workers. They're the people who will be using the items on a day-to-day basis, and they themselves have a wealth of on-the-job knowledge and a commitment to the current processes they're using. And did I mention too that in the switchover, the production goals still need to be met? Does that sound all too familiar? In these types of situations, the leader does not hold the answers and prescribe a precise way forward or the way to do things. This adaptive leader requires the skills to bring all the proper parties together to contribute appropriately and successfully. That scenario can sound very much like what is required and expected in CR work today. Ron Heifetz at Harvard is in essence, the father who developed the concept of adaptive leadership. You see on your screen right now, it's well published in this area, and you can also Google it and find a lot. For today's program, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from and ask questions of two CR experts who will share knowledge and experience on their successes and challenges with CR work. Many of their approaches reflect the adaptive leadership model. While they may have had a vision and thought they saw a clear way forward, their vision and what they saw as the way to do things was not what created their success, nor did either hold the authority to demand or command others. Instead, each had a personal vision around CR and invited others to help create and become a part of an even more compelling vision. You will learn how Bart did this from a senior leadership position, and Catherine Queen has done that from a mid-level position. Bart created an opportunity for people at all levels to understand, embrace, and clearly see ways to do their part toward a commonly held goal. Catherine came into an organization as a new employee at a mid-level position. She worked on tasks that provided her an opportunity to quickly understand the organization and its culture, also developing trust and key relationships. With that foundation, Catherine was able to launch significant partnerships toward the CR goals. Let me briefly introduce both Catherine and Bart. Bart is co-principal of Alexander & Associates, LLC, a Denver-based consulting firm that helps individuals, teams, and organizations achieve meaningful and sustainable change. Bart recently served as Chief Corporate Responsibility Officer for Molson Coors Brewing Company, where he successfully integrated CR into company strategy and culture. During Bart's tenure, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index recognized Molson Coors as the most sustainable beverage company in the world. Additionally, the Carbon Disclosure Project recognized Molson Coors as a leader in climate change action. Additional honors during Bart's Molson Coors tenure included being named a Newsweek Green Sustainable Company and a Top 100 Corporate Citizen by Corporate Responsibility magazine. Bart holds a Master's in Science degree from the London School of Economics, a BA from Harvard College, and he also served as a Senior Executive Fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Catherine also. Catherine Queen is Manager of Sustainability for Ball Corporation. Catherine is a mid-level manager. She joined Ball in her current role in 2013. The Ball Corporation supplies innovative, sustainable packaging solutions for beverage, food, and household products customers worldwide. Ball also supplies aerospace and other technologies and services primarily for the U.S. government. During 2013, the year Catherine joined the company, and for the first time, Ball was listed as the most sustainable company in the containers and packaging industry. Ball was also the only packaging company listed in both the World and North American Dow Jones Sustainability Indices. That year, Ball also ranked by Ecom Research AG as one of its prime companies. In 2014, Newsweek ranked Ball third among the largest U.S. companies on overall environmental performance. Before joining Ball, Catherine was an Associate Environmental Health and Safety Specialist at ConAgra Foods. Catherine earned her bachelor's degree in environmental sciences from Creighton University in Omaha. Bart and Catherine will each speak for about 15 minutes. Then we'll take your questions for about 10 minutes. Please remember that Heather will be collecting your questions online during the session. Bart, why don't you get us started?
So when was the last time you heard someone say, corporate responsibility is not just a destination, it's a journey? Well, of course, corporate responsibility is more than just a program or initiative. It is indeed a journey. But do we really know what that journey requires of us and our organizations? Is this a journey where all we need is a good map and compass or maybe a GPS? Are the destination and path ahead all that clear? I don't think so. Corporate responsibility is not just any old journey. It is, in fact, a journey of transformational change. You and I are here today because we want to positively contribute to that change, whether we're in an executive, management, staff, technical, or academic role. Regardless of our titles, we each strive to be and can be a corporate responsibility leader. Today, we want to engage you in a conversation about what is required of those of us leading this journey. We're asking you to think about what that journey means for you, both personally as well as for your organization. And I'd like to start at the personal level. Let me ask you to reflect. In your corporate responsibility journey, are you alone or do you have travel companions? Do your board, your bosses, your colleagues join you on your pilgrimage? Or are you constantly challenged to make the business case again, demonstrate the ROI again, and yet again justify your own and your organization's use of time and resources? Yes, it is often a lonely journey. In her poem aptly titled The Journey, poet Mary Oliver described the loneliness and the profound personal commitment required to lead transformational change. And let me actually share her poem with you today. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of the clouds, and there was a new voice. There was a new voice which you solely recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do. Determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Wow. Darkness, loneliness, saving your own life. Kind of profound stuff, maybe uncomfortable stuff, and important stuff for corporate responsibility leaders. To quote from the poem, the wild night was full of obstacles. You might ask yourself, why am I so worried about people, ethics, and being green when everyone else is content with just making money? The stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds. Do you have a vision beyond the dark? Can you imagine making money and building social and environmental value at the same time? there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own. Do you have the courage to listen to yourself and speak up, even when your voice may not be welcome? Even when your voice may not be welcome? As you strode deeper and deeper into the world, are you ready for the real world of business with competitive pressures, hurdle rates, organizational politics, and competing investment priorities? Determined to do the only thing you could do? Are you determined? Are you determined to show how responsibility can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of your business and build loyalty with your people, your community, your supply chain, and your consumers? And determined to save the only life you could save? Are you doing what you know in your heart is right for yourself, for your family, for your community, and for the world we have inherited and will leave for future generations? So how you doing? Did you answer yes to these questions? If so, congratulations. You have embraced the depth of the personal challenge that's required to lead transformational change. You have committed to engage not only your mind, but your heart in exercising your leadership. So if we're truly determined to lead and committed to lead change, what's next? How do we use our heads and our hearts to affect meaningful change in our organizations? So, do you get asked to do this kind of head and heart transformational work every day? For most of us, absolutely not. While we may yearn to be part of the transformational change, we often find our days consumed by addressing technical issues once we get beyond the emails. That's not surprising. Many of us were hired as technical experts to provide technical solutions to technical problems. And there are very important technical issues in the corporate responsibility space, including compliance with applicable laws, regulations and practice standards, continuous improvement in health, environmental, and workplace performance, and even traditional philanthropy, identifying worthwhile causes for donation of time and money. Talented technical experts can and do effectively lead these important functions. But we all know these technical improvements seldom drive true transformational change. This New Yorker cartoon really captures the essence of the limitations to technical leadership. May I remind you to loot, pillage, and burn responsibly. If we want our companies to go to the next level, they need to challenge the fundamental ways we do business, not just do the same things better. Technical leadership is necessary, but insufficient for this kind of transformational change. Transformational change requires a different kind of leader, what you've already heard Ron Heifetz calls the adaptive leader. Remember his definition of adaptive leadership: leading change in a situation where both the problem and the solution are unclear. Both the problem and the solution are unclear, and new learning is required by all participants. As Heifetz and his colleagues see it, the adaptive leader is not the one who provides the answers. Rather, this leader's job is to get all the people involved to understand the challenge and work together toward answers. What does such a leader do? First, define the real challenge, the one we really don't want to think about. Second, ask the hard questions, the ones without easy answers. And third, get all the people who need to be involved to the table. So how does an adaptive leader get this kind of perspective? Heifetz uses the metaphor of a dance. There's some aspects of the dance you can only experience on the dance floor. You're keenly aware of your own movements and those of your dance partner, and perhaps some of the people around you. You hear the beat, move your feet, and feel the heat. But you have a very different perspective if you leave the floor and go onto the balcony. You see the overall choreography. You see where the dancers are in sync and equally where they're stepping on toes. From the balcony, you see who's left on the sidelines, whether by choice or not. It's this kind of perspective that yet led Unilever to adopt their sustainable living plan. On the dance floor, they were doing all the right things, more concentrated products to reduce packaging and transportation costs. From the balcony, though, they saw the limitations of just being more efficient. To effectively effectively serve a growing population while lowering demands on energy and water, they realized the entire way we clean ourselves and our clothes needs to change. And they couldn't do that alone. They couldn't even do that working with their supply chain. The Unilever Sustainable Living Plan sets out a bold vision and challenges a wide variety of stakeholders, including consumers and appliance manufacturers, to work together to find a better way forward. So I'd sum this point up by saying, the tip is, get off the dance floor onto the balcony now and then. The adaptive leader practices the Buddhist adage that real control is gained by letting go. Real control is gained by letting go. This means creating a forum, real or virtual, where people with the real responsibility struggle to find meaningful answers. This is not always easy for we corporate responsibility types. We're respected for our knowledge and perspective. We like to be the bright ones with the answers, don't we? We have to resist this temptation and welcome the uncertainty of letting others decide, no matter how stressful that may be to us. That's what we did in my time with Molson Coors. We established a senior-level corporate responsibility council made up of leaders across the functions and geographies of the company. Together, we looked at the big challenges facing the company and the world, issues like climate change, water scarcity, biodiversity, human rights, and alcohol abuse. Then we set goals and targets. Now, realistically, many were incremental, but some were truly transformational. Since the process was decided by the real leaders of the business, these goals and targets were built into the company's strategy and also into both the annual and long-range plans. The adaptive leader makes sure that the work gets done, not by determining the outcome, but by managing the process. Managing the process. And a metaphor we can use is like cooking in a pot, where the pot represents the process that has limits in time and resources. The leader must decide the ingredients that go into the pot, making sure to include the real issues and all the right people. Then the heat has to be high enough to cook, but not so high that everything burns or boils over. The pot can be stirred once in a while to prevent sticking, and in a real crisis, you might have to put the lid on. I used this technique at Molson Coors when a particular senior leader was not so pleased with the result of our Corporate Responsibility Council's cooking. Essentially, he had put himself outside of the process, and from there could offer criticism without offering alternatives. I fought my competitive instincts to take him on. Instead, I asked our CEO to ask him to lead the discussion on corporate responsibility at our upcoming Global Leadership Conference. With that request, I put him into the pot, where he was responsible for the presentation to the CEO and top 100 company leaders, including all the members of the CR Council. Now, the heat was intense. We had less than a month to get this all worked out. 2 weeks went by, and the conference leaders were anxious over the lack of preparation. I resisted multiple requests for me just to fix it. It was on the eve of the presentation, in a hotel conference room late at night, when we had the major breakthrough. The resulting plan was far better than the original proposal that I had made, and this leader became a strong voice for its implementation. I think it's interesting that he will become the new global CEO of Molson Coors at the end of this year. So tip 3 is to get the right people and issues into the pot, and then regulate the heat. Getting leaders aligned is a good start, but the work of corporate responsibility has to be part of everybody's job. This means more than cascading of a corporate message to all employees. We've all been through that one. Adaptive leadership requires both talking in a way that is understood and active listening. It means sharing both responsibility and credit for good ideas. At Molson Coors, we were challenged with the complexity of all the planks of our corporate responsibility plan, all the implementation strategies, all the targets. What would this mean to brewery workers, to administrative assistants, to marketing and sales staff? How could we take this complexity and make it understandable so we could get everybody involved? A supply chain employee in our UK operation came up with the answer. She said, hey, this is pretty simple, guys. When you put a beer down, you leave a mark, a little ring. Let's call it a beer print. That's what we do as a company. We leave a beer print on our people, on our communities, and on the earth. Some of that print is good, like well-paying jobs, responsible enjoyment of our product, and community engagement. Some of it is really bad, like pollution, safety issues, or alcohol abuse. She said, can't we just challenge everybody to look at their jobs and do more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff? We took her idea. We asked every employee of the company to think of 3 little things they could do to improve our beer print. These ideas were discussed in local team meetings and promoted globally through our internal social media. Because employees came up with the ideas themselves and had committed publicly to what they would actually do, the follow-through was truly amazing. And because people knew their ideas mattered, they became more engaged as employees. So the tip in giving the work back to the people is keep it simple. So I ask you to think back to that poem. And let me ask you again, are you ready to lead sustainable change? If so, expect to be challenged not only professionally, but personally. Get the technical issues out of the way. Get up on the balcony and identify the adaptive challenges. Create a forum, a pot that will hold the right people and key issues, and regulate the heat to make the hard work happen. And then make sure you get everybody into the game. So I've shared a bit of how the principles of adaptive leadership worked from my perspective as a CRO. But let's say you're in another role, a manager in a large company. How can you affect positive change if you're not a senior leader? And for that, I'll turn it over to Catherine.
Thank you so much, Bart. I apologize in advance for my voice. I'm currently getting over the flu, but I'm truly honored to be here. I have to tell you, it is one of the most incredible experiences following you in a webinar such as this. Bart represents one of the greatest mentors I have when I think about leading sustainable change, and I noticed during Bart's presentation I was still taking copious notes, as I always do during our conversations. However, now I think it is most appropriate as a continuous student of life to answer the question posed by Bart throughout his presentation. Are you ready to lead sustainable change? Now, it is important to reiterate that I am fairly new in my career, working in corporate sustainability, so my perspective and answer to this question may be different than many others. However, the question has always been very applicable to me in my career. Since I was a junior in high school, I had a very strong idea of what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to identify it through a job title. However, the answer to the question of whether I was ready to lead sustainable change has always been a strong yes. Although I haven't always known exactly what I was signing up for, I have been and will always be ready to take on the challenge. And I recognize that this is a question I must continue to ask myself because the environment for sustainability is constantly changing. The lessons I learned from transitioning from academia to corporate America have been life-changing. Fortunately, in college, I had professors who were committed to establishing a community of critical thinking. I recognized the mindset in my older peers when they graduated was, you're only succeeding if you have all the answers. And the thought that you must go out and change the world like your graduation speech demanded. Early on, I realized that when it came to the field of sustainability, I was always jumping into the unknown that Bart had described to figure out how to give myself the best opportunity to have a foundation in sustainable change in the world outside my college campus. It was an adventure without a map. In college, my plan was to get all of my mandatory classes out of the way first, and then immediately jump into creating my own major in a sense. I started building my repertoire of classes to not only focus on science, but business and societal concerns. I met with teachers one-on-one for personal instruction frequently to connect all the topics I was learning in this interdisciplinary roadmap I was creating. I recognized that if I wanted to work in corporate America and quote-unquote sell sustainability to anyone who had the ability to make those decisions, I had to not only sound like I knew what I was talking about, but I really had to know what I was talking about. I took economics, managerial courses, sociology courses, GIS, the list goes on. I did whatever I could to take as many classes as possible to gain a holistic understanding of what would be needed to achieve my dream job and make it a successful career. Now, when I say dream job, I do not take this lightly. Although it has become a very cliche coin phrase and sometimes a pie-in-the-sky way of looking at careers, for me it was always what kept me from backing out of the unknown map. I knew what I wanted to do, I just needed to figure out how to make it happen. Cliche, yes, but extraordinarily helpful to actually making my goals come true by acting passionately, conscientiously, and making a plan. These skills and desires to establish an interdisciplinary understanding of the business world created an incredible foundation to working in the sustainability field. This comes to my next point, which I learned very early on in my career. It is not only important, but absolutely pertinent to harness your personal and professional skills when you are signing up to lead sustainable change. When you are young, these skills are hard to identify, but you need to learn from the culture around you, figure out what is required to get you where you want to go, and recognize that what your organization needs may be different than what they want. Sustainability is all around us, from family life to boardroom meetings. Everyone has something to contribute, and it is critical that you take the time to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are and use that information to establish a continuous foundation for learning. Since I was young, I've always asked questions. This is one of my strengths. I always want to know the ins and outs of every situation. So in college, when it came to figuring out how to take the dream job I had in mind and make it a reality, whether it actually existed in the workplace or not was something I didn't know how to do. So what did I do? I became a sponge. I signed up for every volunteer opportunity that had the word green, business, or similar words in it. I set up coffee dates from names I found through Google searches to connect with professionals in large companies in the area to try to figure out if the job I wanted actually existed. I did whatever I could to learn as much as possible about how to make my dreams a reality. And while I could spend a whole webinar talking about my networking advice and how I transitioned from a volunteer opportunity to working at a Fortune 500 company as a junior in college in the sustainability field, I want to make my point very clear. I became a sponge. I started recognizing that while academia had provided me the foundation for learning, critical thinking, and other necessary skills, I needed more. I needed experience. And the best way to start getting experience in my mind was twofold. Learn from others and then work, work, work. From my hundreds of phone calls, coffee dates, and lunches, I learned a lot. I networked a lot. I asked the hard questions. I went into every networking opportunity ready to learn, and that was my first priority. Now, as tip number 5 suggests, I get to squeeze it out. From my very first networking meeting to lunches with peers now, I'm always learning, and even though I'm fairly young, I feel like I have so many experiences thanks to the osmosis of learning from my mentors like Bart. Every single day, I keep learning and keep squeezing out everything I have learned since I first signed up to lead sustainable change. As I mentioned before, to succeed in this field, I must never forget that signing up for this change is not a one-time deal, but instead it is a lifetime commitment. The question Bart asked about, "Are you ready?" is something I ask myself daily to align my personal priorities as well as the priorities of my company. With sustainability, there is no map. There are many guideposts along the way, hidden in the wisdom of peers, global cultural differences, and the day-to-day business activities. So as we mentioned, when you sign up for sustainable change, you have to jump into the unknown. And yes, at the beginning, you sign up for it all. But there is no way to fully understand what you are signing up for until you get involved and get experience. During this time, it is important to say yes to every opportunity, whether it seems relevant or not. While this may lead to many late nights working, every minute of it will be worth it. No matter what, I have found that every meeting, whether it specifically says sustainability in the Outlook invite or not, has to do with my job. It is critical for me to understand every aspect of the business because it all fits into the sustainability puzzle. It has been vital for me, especially being younger, to gain as much experience and knowledge at my company as possible from the get-go. You have to learn the words of the culture you are in so people know you are committed to them and the organization's priorities. I have never let my quote-unquote amount of experience, as you would detail on a resume, hold me back. I am never afraid to say how many years I've been working in the field because, as one of my favorite presidents once said, in the end, it's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years. Don't ever belittle your experience, I learned, because passion carries you through, especially in the sustainability field. It takes technical and integrated knowledge from all different experiences and backgrounds. Throughout my various positions and jobs over the years, I have learned a lot, and while I still hold the utmost respect for those who have 2 and 3 times the amount of experience as I do not let this hold me back from learning and gaining the knowledge they have to offer. Now, I have to say that I never come into a situation acting like I know more than someone who has more experience. That, to me, is not a good way to live. Instead, I walk into every situation and say to myself, what can I bring to this conversation, and what can I learn? I have also become aware that in many cases it is detrimental to focus on my attitude, that this is where I learned what I learned from school. Because based on my experience, it's experience and experience alone that will teach you more than any amount of schooling. And that is because of all the interactions you make, the individuals you learn from and their experiences, as well as the different knowledge you will obtain from the different company cultures. The tip on this page comes from another motto that I live by in this field, and that is put on your steel-toed boots. Working in environmental health and safety after college, I had the opportunity to participate in numerous audits at the manufacturing plants. With regards to my career, the awareness I gained from these audits is one of the most beneficial skills I will forever hold on to. It is easy working in your corporate position to forget about the real reason you have your job. Each day, you go to your cubicle, sit at your computer, talk on the phone. It is easy to become disconnected, especially in manufacturing, from those working on the line at the manufacturing facilities. One of my favorite parts of my job is talking to my plant contacts. They are the reason I have my job, and I try never to forget that. By keeping this at the forefront of my mind is what I learned when I was participating in the environmental health and safety audits. I had the opportunity to not only put on steel-toed boots literally in the manufacturing plants, but get a small taste of how corporate plans, initiatives, and ideas are not only understood, but what they mean on the plant floor. This knowledge is huge as it defines the culture of a company. Manufacturing is truly the backbone of the world, and at a company, you can see the microcosm of this. When I would return from the EH&S audits and be in meetings with senior executives talking about pie-in-the-sky ideas about how to roll out initiatives, I would raise my hand and ask, how is that going to work on the manufacturing floor? At first, when I was fairly new, this was not an easy thing to ask. But after a while, people depended on me to ask that question because it was indeed critical and I was not afraid to ask it. There are many ideas, especially in sustainability, that arise. However, many of these ideas are not feasible, especially when you're talking about the second and third shifts at a plant. It's critical for engagement and success of any sustainable change in a business to recognize all players, all stakeholders, from the investors and customers down to the manufacturing shift workers. As Bart said, and this is really key, we are tasked to ask people to do their job differently, and I completely agree. However, it is also important to recognize, for instance, for many sustainability metrics we track, such as water, energy, waste, etc., many manufacturing businesses already have a culture of efficiency. It has been part of the business for decades, and what may make sense at the C-suite level may not translate to the work done by the third generation of men and women working on the plant floor. That is why this motto and tips shown on this page is so important to me. It is critical to understand not only who is at the table, but what shoes you need. I have found that it is necessary for me to be able to translate the same sustainability message into a variety of languages. Now, I'm not referring to language in the typical geographical sense, but instead language as it relates to people and organizational culture. For instance, I can be in an executive meeting one day and on the phone with someone in a plant overseas the next day. It is important that although the overarching message may be the same, the way in which I say it, whether it be with scientific language, business language, or even just community-oriented language, that I recognize who is at the table. Who does the message need to impact? What are their priorities? And what means the most to them? This is the best advice I have because sometimes technical knowledge will only be able to take you so far. Even then, sometimes experience can only take you so far. But at the end of the day, if you can understand the culture and the people at the organization, you can use this to your advantage to better communicate and succeed with your sustainability initiatives. So while it is important to know who is at the table, so you know what information to communicate and how, it is just as important to encourage others, such as senior management, to put on their steel-toed boots figuratively, even during the big meetings, to help everyone remember the work required on the line. And while it may be easy to talk about these ideas at the corporate level, the execution of these ideas may not be realistic at the manufacturing level. It is important to bridge the gap between the two in order to successfully lead sustainable change. Now, starting out in corporate America, and even now, I don't always have the courage to stand up. First and foremost, as I mentioned before, I always want to listen and learn. However, it is an important transition to learn to be an active participant, as Bart suggested. Now, while I'm not one to stand on my soapbox during meetings, because that's just not my style, I also do not think that is enough to sit back and hope that someone else will ask a question or respectfully challenge the conversation either. One of my mentors taught me, you are hired to bring to the table your skills, so show us and do it. This is simple and straightforward, but easy to forget. It can be hard in conversations where you are told multiple times, that's not how we do it here. But in reality, change has to start somewhere. One critical point, though, is that when you are working towards sustainable change, it is never good to immediately start challenging the way things have always been done, because that is a recipe for losing trust and credibility and losing the opportunity to learn from the culture and be able to use it to your advantage. In my mind, it is better when you ask probing questions to back your statements up with what you know about the culture, organization, and its people. That is where you gain credibility, not by acting like you know more than everyone else in the room. Diversity of thought is critical to success in the sustainability field because it will take a village to make sustainable changes. Leadership support can be challenging, and in my experience, especially with big indexes such as the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, it is really important for leadership to understand the breadth and depth of what you are talking about. For instance, with DJSI, many companies just sign up to be on the index without integrating the pieces required into the foundation and culture of the company. Fortunately, at Ball, everyone is dedicated to walking the talk. It is easy to write policies, create metrics, etc. to quote-unquote get on the index, but that does not establish a foundation for sustainability, but instead leaves you with a foundation made of sticks instead of concrete. At Ball, we are deeply committed to rooting our culture in sustainable plans and ensuring that our employees are engaged and excited about our sustainable company. The key is to build the network within the company. Get everyone in the conversation to understand why sustainability is important and work from there. Everyone has different agendas and priorities, so it is important to make sustainability relate to each individual, as then you can ignite passion across the enterprise. If you happen to land on the index such as DJSI, great. After making it an integral part of your culture, the recognition is just a plus and should represent recognition for cross-department enterprise commitment. Overall, I'm a firm believer in establishing trust. As Stephen Covey said, trust is the best medium to grow success. I have seen many people my age walk into a room and basically tell everyone they're wrong. You can look around the room and immediately see that the people with 25+ years of experience immediately turn off their willingness to engage. And who blames them? Never feel entitled. You have to earn what you deserve, and I truly believe that. At my level and age, I always start with trust and credibility by building relationships, networking, and securing the tools I need for success. When I walk into meetings or plans, I definitely get the look of, who are you and what do you know? But I respect that, and I start at square one. Sometimes it means starting the conversation off in a manufacturing plant about the recent football game in the local high school stadium. Other times, it's talking to an engineer about the latest line that has been put in. Just remember, everyone has something to offer. If you can start with a motive to learn from that person, you can figure out where their passion lies and then communicate what you need and want based on what matters to them. Being an active participant means not only leaning into every conversation, but also building your network. While there are many important personal and professional reasons to build a network, the point I want to make here applies to tip 6, avoid tunnel vision. I have found one of the best ways of falling into the monotonous day-to-day tasks that don't seem to move the needle is to use my network to help me see the bigger picture. I connect with people all the time to help broaden my perspective. Not only does this help the data make sense, it'll help it helps take the blinders off and recognize what really matters. I talk to my plant contacts all the time, sometimes every day. I want to be transparent whenever possible and provide resources and guidance to help them meet their organization's goals. Yes, metrics are important, but in my opinion, you can't drive a car using a rearview mirror, and understanding the bigger picture of sustainable change helps me not lose sight of the view outside the windshield. Overall, I want to summarize my part of the webinar by saying another yes, again to Bart's question. Yes, I have been, am, and will always be ready to continue to commit to sustainable change. And from my personal experience, I know it always won't be easy, but I do know it will always be worth it, and I truly believe that. And repeat that every day, because every day has new challenges in the sustainability field. But if you have the right experiences, shoes, and network, the possibilities are endless of what you can do and the sustainable change and foundation that you can create.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Bart. I'd like to share a couple of observations before we move into the questions. What I heard, both Bart and Catherine created their successes by working through and with others. They both built trust and involvement, creating opportunities and relationships that move the CR work forward. And it's essential to both understand and honor the culture or cultures within a particular organization and the way it and its people think and work. Now let's see what kinds of questions Heather has gathered for us. Catherine, Heather, Bart, are you all out there?
We're here. Heather, do you have some questions, or?
Let me start with some questions while we wait for Heather. Catherine, I have a question for you. You mentioned that you've always had the courage to stand up in this field. Can you share an experience when you haven't had the same courage your presentation shows?
Yes, honestly, I think even though I gained a lot of experience and plant knowledge when I first would go to those EH&S audits that I talked about when I was right out of college, it was a very challenging time for me. Not only was the learning curve steep, but I also had to overcome some personal challenges. When I was right out of college and would show up at the plant, I would get a lot of the looks of, who is this blonde girl and what could she possibly be here to tell or teach us? Although this doesn't happen now, when I would get done with the day back then, I sometimes would feel completely defeated when I would be back in my hotel room. However, I never let this show when I was at the plant. I would always stand up tall and the next day try a different approach. This is the time when I learned the importance of being able to communicate the same messages hundreds of different ways. I had to make what I was talking about not only reliable, but relatable and meaningful. I also had to prove to myself that I could do it, and sometimes I was scared when I would go back the next day, but I recognized the passion in myself for the field, but needed to also understand the perspective from everyone I was working with. So I took those bleak times as a chance to prove myself, to show that not only I knew what I was talking about, but I was on their same team and wanted to do everything in my power to make their job easier. So I still have those moments, definitely, with the same defeated feelings to this day. But I always use that as a chance to take a step back, reassess the type of approach needed in a specific situation, and then go from there. I think sustainability is a field that sparks a lot of passion. You just have to let down your guard and recognize that others may not be as passionate about the same things as you are, but use it as an opportunity to learn from them, find out what is important, and then work from there. I think we have the opportunity as sustainability professionals to weave together many different departments and disciplines. But I think in order to do that, you must first listen and understand the different pieces. I think that's the only way at the end you could create that tapestry for sustainable change Bart and I have been talking about.
Great, thank you. Bart, I'm going to...
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my headset. I had a new headset, and all of a sudden I'm talking and nothing's coming out. So it was good because there's a fire truck going by. So can I give you a question from one of the listeners?
Please do.
It says, how do you introduce a new mission, a new vision new challenges into an organization with 50 years of experience in process and culture into the future when they live in the past?
Well, let me take a stab at that. I would say that the introduction of new ideas is always uncomfortable for people. So to start with the perception that you're living in the past, you're looking in a rearview mirror, get with the future is really the wrong place to start. I think both Catherine and I spent a fair amount of time in this presentation talking about earning your creds in the company at whatever level, really understanding the people and their processes. And Catherine talked a little bit about cultural translation. I found that at a senior level, sometimes I felt like a chameleon. You walk into a finance meeting or you walk into an operations meeting, and I would try to be one of them. And that's part of that personal discomfort that I talked about. You sort of think, am I not being myself? Am I becoming someone else in order to do this job? And keeping track of, I have some ideas I think I can contribute, but I want to learn enough about where they are and what they're thinking about and gain enough trust that I respect that when I introduce ideas, they see those not as criticism of how they've done them, but as opportunities to do their jobs better. And slowly, as you build your way, having small successes, getting a team or a leader to take some small steps, they turn to you and say, maybe I can trust this person to take some bigger steps. I do think that it is that certain environmental factors do matter. If the company is doing quite well, thank you, and financially in its current operation, it may be harder to create change. On the other hand, that creates the resources for change. At the same time, if a company is under pressure from the market, that might create urgency to do something, but it also makes resources to do something more difficult. But there's no easy answer. That's why it's that dark and lonely path at night with the stones and branches in front of you. And you've got to have that internal strength to say, I'm committed to be here in the long run.
That's great. Let me give you one more. I have, this actually is great because Catherine talked about it a little bit, but where can people go to get mentoring and consulting support? Conferences are great, but is there something that's more tailored to a specific situation? Are there websites? Are there consulting services? Are there conferences? Are there things that people can do for mentoring in the field?
Catherine, I'd be curious to hear what your experience has been with this. I'll start by saying that part of the adaptive leadership process is recognizing if you are this change agent in an organization, whatever level you're at, that can be lonely. Talked about that loneliness, and you need to have travel companions. You might find those people in your organization. You can find allies. You can find people you can talk to and support and develop each other. Often those are people you need to find outside the organization. Go outside in local sustainability networks in your community. Find people who you can talk to. It may be friends working in very different companies or very different even sectors, but having a support system is really important. I have to say that I think for many of us, the Corporate Responsibility Association is a great place to make those connections and to create those networks. It's a professional organization where you can actually, that peer-to-peer support is an essential part of what that organization is about. There are consultants and there are people who can help with this sort of work. Joan and I are doing some work like that. We'd certainly be open if people would like to talk to us to try to help anybody find what would be a good resource for you, and perhaps that would even be us, but we'd be glad to have a conversation about what works for you if you're feeling a bit lost.
Just to add to that, Bart, yeah, from my perspective, I have gone to a ton of conferences. You could probably spend your whole career going to conferences and reading everything there is out there about this field. The best experience I have with mentors and networking is what you said, is that peer-to-peer relationship with people outside the company. In sustainability, we don't have the luxury of being in big departments, so we don't have a lot of peers within the company in that sense, but I'm personally a part of a local group that has quite a few representatives from larger companies in it. And sometimes we get together after work, sometimes we meet for lunch during work, or we'll have a meeting, and these meetings are anywhere from very formal to informal, and it just provides an avenue for us to, whether it's venting or getting better ideas or talking about in a safe environment, a way to improve our processes. It's a really good way for me to connect with other people and get other ideas. Since everyone is kind of on that same dark road, if you're on it together, you can have a lot more ways of finding the path.
Great. Do we have time for one more, do we think?
Sure.
Yeah, I think, sure. One more question. You both have talked about great results in your CR work. How do you prove the value of your company's CR efforts when you do not have national or international awards to show? How do you tell your story?
So, the triple bottom line idea is not a bad place to start in a framework for thinking that through. And obviously, within your own company, demonstrating that building environmental and social value uses economic value to the company is really important, particularly in the early days. I think that if you look at sustainability or corporate responsibility as an add-on to the business, some great truth that we as professionals are going to bring to this company, you've already lost the game. This has to be a role where we play in our field almost an internal consulting role. We're there to help other people do their jobs better. And it's amazing how people see their basic corporate metrics improving. Catherine mentioned operations people have a culture of efficiency. They're trying to use less resources. Give them credit. Build their support. You're going to get a lot more traction that way.
Yeah, adding to that, that's exactly what I was going to say is employee engagement. I think telling the local stories is an excellent place to start internally, just igniting people's passions. That always rolls up, and even though you don't have those big awards, at the end of the day, that's not what matters to the people who are doing the job. It's being able to get recognized for what they're doing day to day to make a difference. So I would say starting with that employee engagement is a great place to start.
And that's true whether you're talking about engagement at the plant floor, giving people credit for what they're doing, recognizing them is important. It's also true in the C-suite, recognizing the progress people make. Give an opportunity for the head of finance, the head of operations to go and bring a big win to that table. Don't go in as the CR person saying, look what we made happen. Bring the person in who did it and let them take credit. That builds the culture.
I think with that, it's time to say thank you for joining us. We all wish you a happy and safe holiday season, and if we can be of any other further help, don't hesitate to contact one of us.
Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy your holidays. Bye-bye.